did you know that Enneagram type 2 was the one out of all the other types that you were?
That's such a good question. Like, how did I know? Like, to me, there's like two parts of it. It's like, well, when did I learn about the Enneagram?
Mhm.
And then as I was looking at the different options, like which one resonated with me. And I think the Enneagram is one of those tools. Like as a former organization development consultant and now a business coach, mentor for other consultants and coaches, like I know a lot about personality assessments. So I love personality tools. That was a big part of my formative career. But the Enneagram was different is that it to me it presents more than just like what are your strengths and weaknesses. Like you might look at like a strengths finder, Myers-Briggs disc or what have you, but Enneagram to me plays a unique special role. Is it really talks about like the transformation journey, like what is like your style of what are your strengths, but what's your protection style? Like what is it that you use to protect yourself from feeling vulnerable? What's your path of growth? And it kind of gives you like that custom path to me. And that's why I thought it was interesting. And then when I looked at the different options, like, well, how do I protect myself? And it's like, clearly it's being that people pleaser, making sure that I'm that person who comes alongside. So when it comes to like the plus side of my career, I've always been that person where it's like, I always imagine like where I position myself as an organization development consultant is I never saw myself as the leader. I always saw myself as the right hand. And that's the way I've always
Mm.
positioned myself. So I knew leadership like I was always interested in that realm, but it's like being at that right hand, what was really important. And that's been a theme throughout my whole career is I'm like the power behind the throne. I'm the person who's like, behind the scenes whispering, like, do this, do that. But what kind of confused me sometimes, like with the two, is they always make pictures of like, some woman who's like a helper, with
Mhm.
the muffins and the cookies and helping everybody. I'm like, that's not the way my two aspect shows up. Like I'm not like the hospitality homemakery kind of person. So that was the one part that was like, is that really me? But when I really thought about it more broadly, around what does it mean to be a helper, that's when it made sense to me. Choose like that rescuer, where it's like the biggest thing that you can get me into action is like, oh, I have a need, and it took me years to realize like your need does not equal my calling. Like I'm not
Mm.
obligated, but it's like there's that rescuer thing. And that's where it goes into the shadow is, it's like the rescuer in the shadow can turn into control, like you could see in the plus side, like somebody's drowning, the lifeguard goes in and gets them. But then when your self-esteem is tied to helping, then you're going to just like keep throwing people back in the ocean so you can keep, rescuing them. So I see some of that and it's like so I know that that's a part of me that is like my strength and then it's my Achilles heel at the same time.
Okay, I wrote that down. Your need does not equal my calling. That's so good, Betsy. I think a lot of other twos will be able to resonate with that. They're probably thinking, "Oh my gosh, you're reading my mind." I feel that. Um, how I know, we've talked off this particular interview, just kind of behind the scenes in the past. And then you kind of alluded to it just now with saying how your self-esteem used to be attached to how helpful you were. How have you noticed yourself growing through what you're learning about the Enneagram and then specifically this type 2 energy?
I think that what I love about the Enneagram is the dynamic aspect of the tool. So there's a way that you can look at it more like, okay, so here's my pathway. And so I like what you said about like the two being about connection. And if you even think about the number two, it's like 1, 2, it's like, I want connection, So,
Oh.
you can kind of see even it's a perfect number, versus like perfectionist for the number one. I'm sure it's not on purpose, but I just kind of visualize it like that. But I can resonate with the two, in that standpoint. So like to me, like there's phases. Like phase one is just the awareness, So in terms of like when I'm in my strength, there is something about like I love to help people, and I could talk to you a little bit more about like how I've leaned into the plus and the shadow.
Yes.
But I like just the whole idea of that. But then seeing that when I'm stressed out, going into the 8, like I could definitely see that. Like I'm not really an angry person in general, but Like, but when, when you keep trying, when you're the two, it's like, oh, it's not working. It's like, then it's like, or you're giving more than you're getting. All of a sudden it's like, 8. And then seeing that pathway of going to 4, that's when I really started to see, like, when my growth started really becoming more of a, like, when, I don't know how to say this, like, I really saw the challenge of going to a 4 and what that really meant to me when I was at this speaker workshop. So you and I are both a part of Carol Cox's community. And I remember I'm not a 4. So I've never been somebody who's like, I have to be on the stage. And I remember at Carol's event, there was an initial exercise where everybody had to stand up and say, when did you know that you were supposed to be part of the stage? I'm like, never. Like, I avoid the spotlight at all costs. Like, even though, like, I have a podcast, I have a YouTube channel and all of that, I'm hiding in plain sight, because when you are out speaking, and if you're really a thought leader, you have to really tell your story. It's easy for me to stand up and facilitate a group of executives because I'm not there. I'm just there. I'm behind the scenes, even though I'm standing up in front of the room, because I'm coordinating all of this and I'm drawing out everybody else's opinion. But if I'm standing on the stage and I'm sharing my own story, my own opinion, I felt like I wanted to die. And they would do these exercises, where it's like, you have to stand up and dance in front of everybody. I'm like, oh, kill me now. Like, I do not want it. But everybody else was like, I'm on the stage, look at me and all of that. I'm like, oh no. And I knew that was my growth point. Like, and I knew how hard it was, like how hard it is to get out of a 2 or evolve as a 2 into that 4 of like, I'm the person on the stage. I'm telling my own story. I'm not hiding behind everybody else's. I'm not hiding behind this power behind the throne kind of thing, or being that, come alongside you and I'll help activate your potential kind of thing. I have a potential within myself, and that creates a panic. And that's when I really knew, like, wow, this is like totally my energy. I'm having a total, like, I feel all of my protection and my vulnerability just like activated all over the place.
Yeah. And what's interesting is sometimes that arrow to your growth number can be called the neglected strategy, because it's the one that you kind of get the most bang for your buck when you can lean into that. But also, it's a lot of times the one that you might resist the most. And so for listeners who may not be as familiar, that type 4 energy is a little bit more focused on this yourself. How do I feel? And, what do I want? And what are my needs? Where 2 tends to be on the others, like, how are others feeling? And so it almost feels like selfish to think, well, what do I want? What do I think? What do I feel? And, 4s are striving to feel unique. And that can, again, kind of go into direct conflict with that striving to feel connected and kind of, almost merge with others. But interesting, like you're saying, when you cannot be a 2 or, try to become a 4, but pull in some of that energy to enhance what you already have going on, you can step on a stage and you can be the leader. And so I love hearing about that.